On the occasion of International Day of Yoga, we have arranged this 15-day webinar series, particularly focusing on pranayama. All of you know the Patanjali's yoga system is called Ashtanga Yoga, consisting of 8 angas or limbs. Unfortunately, very few of them are discussed or in vogue. What are being presently emphasized is the asana. Even that is according to the Hatha Yoga practices of the physical body, and the dhyana, which is a very, very high state, next only to samadhi. So we thought it is necessary to emphasize some of the limbs which are less discussed. One such is pranayama, prana, which means life energy or force, and niyamana of prana, control of prana, regulation of prana is called pranayama. This is slightly less discussed. And we will begin with a quote from the Rig Veda, which has been quoted by Rabindranath Tagore in his famous treatise on sadhana. Rabindranath Tagore, in English, has composed the sadhana, and we used to read it in school. There is one quotation of Rabindranath from Rig Veda, which I remember after 50 years. It is so profound, and it is called Prano Virat. Prano Virat means prana is huge, great. That means prana is of great importance. Vastness and importance of prana, and borrowing this from Rabindranath Tagore, I will go on to explain this idea in the later Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. All of you know Raja Yoga is one of the yogas Swami Vivekananda taught in the West. He taught the 4 yogas, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. And he also wanted that these 4 yogas should be harmoniously blended in the modern age, because the deficiencies in one of them, the practice of one of them, will be offset by the other. He made a beautiful, humorous statement about the Westerners getting this idea of yoga. I want to give them hard, dry reason, Jnana Yoga, soaked in the sweetest syrup of love, Bhakti Yoga, made spicy with work, Karma Yoga, and cooked in the kitchen of yoga, Raja Yoga, so that even a baby may be able to digest it. Rabindranath Tagore quotes the following Rig Veda verse, which is, Atharva Veda verse, and the Rig Veda also may be having this, 11.4.12. Prano Virat, Prano Dveshtri, Pranam Sarve Upasate, Prano Hi, Pranoha, Suryas Chandramaha, Pranamahuhu Prajapatim. All of you know that Rabindranath's father, Devendranath Tagore, was a great rishi. He was called Maharshi Devendranath, and he was very fond of the Upanishads and the Vedas. Rabindranath definitely must have been taught these passages by his father, or in his own he must have studied. And as you know, Maxwell had also translated the Vedas, and the translation which is normally given, I have skipped the translation and done it on my own. because many of the translators normally translate prana as breath. Swami Vivekananda points out there's a wrong translation by the Westerners. Like they say, Shraddha is faith. Religion is a dharma. These are some of the words which are very peculiar to Hindu religion and the Sanatana Dharma, which hardly can be faithfully translated into English. For example, the word Atman. Swami Vivekananda sometimes translates it as self, but most occasions he simply kept the word Atman as it is. Because the word Atman, Brahman, have some specific connotations having been used in Vedanta over several hundred years with the rishis and thereafter with the Bhashyakaras and the commentators. Better to keep them as they are, since we are used to Sanskrit language, because most of the languages in India owe their origin to Sanskrit. This vocabulary is not unfamiliar to us. We'll keep it as prana. Prano virat is a very profound statement. Rabindranath interestingly translated life as immense. Prana, he takes it by life. Immense is huge, vast. This prana is huge, vast, fathomless, omnipresent. Swami Vivekananda will talk about it a little later, we'll come to that. Prano virat, prano deshtri. Deshtri, Shayanacharya, the great commentator of the Vedas. All of you know, there are two great commentators of the Vedas, or Veda Bhashyakaras. One is Shayanacharya, the other is Bhatta Bhaskara. Shayanacharya sometimes is more ritualistic in his interpretation, going to the Upasana more than the philosophy. And the Bhatta Bhaskara is highly philosophical and extremely spiritual in his interpretation. Now, the Shayanacharya's interpretation here is Deshtri Swasva Vyapareshu Sarvesham Prerayatri Paradevata. It's a very interesting statement. Who is prana? What is prana? Prana is that Paradevata, the supreme deity. Devata, once again, is very difficult to translate. Devata comes from the Div Dhatu. Div means to shine, being luminous, resplendent. This Devata, which is luminous, Paradevata, the supreme Devata, supreme deity. Prerayatri, Devata is Strilinga, feminine, gender. Prerayatri, who impels, who inspires. Swasva Vyapareshu Sarvesham Prerayatri. Sarvesham, all beings. Prerayatri, the impeller, the director, the inspirer of what? The beings. Where? Swa Vyapareshu. In the respective functions. Devata or Deva also means the senses. The senses, usually what we call the five senses of perception, Pancha Jnanendriyas, and the five organs of action, Pancha Karmendriyas. These are called 10 senses. And mind is also called the 11th Indriya. There are 11 Indriyas, 5 plus 5 plus 1. And the eye which sees, Chakshu, the Karna, the ear which hears, the tongue, Jihva, which tastes, and the nose, Nasika, which smells, and the skin, Tvak, which touches. Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. These are called Panchatanmatras, the subtle beings, Bhutas, Sukshma Bhuta, subtle perceptions. And these are being accomplished by the five organs, Jnanendriyas. These are also called Devatas. Now the question is asked in the Vedas of the Upanishads, which is the Devata, which is the supreme being which directs, inspires, impels all these various senses to their respective functions. The Kena Upanishad begins with this. Kene shitam vadati preshitam manah, kena prana prasama priti yuktaha, kene shitam vachamimam vadanti, chakshusrotram kavudevo yunakti. What is the devata? What is the luminous being which impels and directs and inspires all the senses to their respective functions? How is it that the mind is impelled to think? How is it that the ears are impelled to hear? How is it the eyes are impelled to see? How is it the tongue is inspired to taste? How is it the twak or the skin is directed to feel the sense of touch? Is it the eye which sees or something behind the eye? Is it the ear which hears or some other power behind the ear? Is it the mind which thinks or some other power behind the mind? Is it the skin which touches or something behind it? So in investigating this very simple question, they came out with a profound answer. Remember that the Upanishads and the Vedic pursuit, inquiry, is not philosophy or metaphysics or religion. It is a series of simple, naive questions analyzing our everyday experience. And the profound answers to these simple questions compiled is what is called the Upanishads. See, the Upanishads, the rishis were not speculating. They were asking simple questions about daily experience. The senses see, but what is the power behind the senses that makes it possible? Is it the eyes alone which see, or something behind the eye? Then they found out there is some power behind the mind and the senses. And they say, simple language, Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Manoyat Vachoha Vacham Savu Pranasya Pranaha Chakshushas Chakshurati Muchadhira Pretyasman Lokat Amrita Bhavanti. There is an eye of the eye, there is a mind of the mind, the ear of the ear, and knowing that Supreme Devata behind all this, one becomes immortal after death. This is the first stanza of the Kena Upanishad. The Shvetashvatara Upanishad. Brahmavadino vadanti. All the inquirers of Brahman, the great rishis, sitting under the noble sky, calming their mind through tapasya, they are discussing and asking very simple questions. Inkaranam Brahma kutaspajata ivamakena kutasampratishta. What is that sustains our life? How is it that we are able to sit and talk and function? What is that power behind all this which happens? Is it Brahman? What is that Brahman? These are the questions that they repeatedly asked. By control of senses, they meditated, did intense tapasya, and found out the supreme power behind all this, which they called Brahman. So this also says, Prano Deshtri, it is the impeller. Pranam sarve upasate, in Sandhi, sarva upasate, sarve, everybody, all beings, they worship the prana. It's a great discovery in the Vedas and the Upanishads. We see this world, which is jada. Jada means sthula, gross, insentient, unconscious. But somebody has to certify the existence of the world. This jada padartha, insentient, unconscious thing, does not come and tell me, I exist, sir, here. But the conscious me say, you exist. You table, I see that you exist. Sun and the moon and the stars, the galaxies, the macrocosm, and the atom and the particles and the protons and electrons, all the microcosm, all of them are being certified by me. think of the glory of the self, of the Atman, of the consciousness. Unless I certify to the world doesn't exist. This is a bone of contention by even scientists. This came to the light only when the quantum theory came in 1900, exactly a year or two before Swamiji passed away. Swami Vivekananda passed away in 1902, July. 1900, Max Planck came with his quantum theory and later on developed the quantum mechanics thanks to the discovery of the wave-particle dualism by de Broglie, and developed into a huge system of matrix mechanics by Heisenberg, who also gave us the famous uncertainty principle. And interestingly, Albert Einstein, the stalwart of a scientist in those days, at that time, the galaxy of scientists like Schrödinger, Heisenberg, Einstein, then Max Planck, Niels Bohr, Einstein did not believe in the probabilistic interpretation of quantum mechanics. In fact, he said, I do not believe that God plays dice. You play a game of dice, it can be 4, it can be 10, it can be 7. God definitely knows what he is doing. Whole world is deterministic. But all the experiments in the micro world in quantum theory completely dispelled this belief and then said quantum mechanics is only probabilistic. Nature has a limit of knowledge. This is a very interesting statement by Heisenberg. There's a limit up to which you can know, and up to that limit alone, nature can reveal its secrets. Beyond that, you can't. There's a narrow width called uncertainty principle. There's an inbuilt uncertainty, indeterminacy in our knowledge of nature. Arthur Eddington, who was a contemporary of Einstein, has a beautiful book, old book, 1930s. It is a collection of his lectures. All of you should definitely read this book. It contains no mathematics. And principle, he did not use any equation. He's explained the whole thing so beautifully and so humorously. He says, in trying to take water from the well of knowledge through a bucket. In those days, they used to draw water from the well through a bucket. And he says our intellect, our understanding is a leaky bucket. In trying to draw water from this bucket of knowledge, every piece of knowledge is equivalently replaced by a piece of ignorance. You know something, and equally, there is a piece of ignorance which is implanted into your knowledge. Then it ends by saying, it is impossible to empty the well of knowledge through a leaky bucket. Our intellect is a leaky bucket. You can try and try, up to a point alone you can go. Beyond that, nature prevents you from knowing more unless you become that knowledge. There is another statement attributed to Maxwell. He said, in trying to understand the functioning of nature and the secrets of nature, in the ultimate analysis, we find that we ourselves form part of nature and therefore part of the mystery that we're trying to solve. Just like you can't lift yourself by yourself. Somebody has to lift you. So Swami Vivekananda therefore says that the whole universe is composed of two materials, one of which is called Akasha. Before I go to that, I'll also come back to Einstein once more. Einstein's died a very sad man because his idea of determinism coming from the Judeo-Christian belief did not work, particularly in the micro world. In the world of the microcosm, the atoms and still the particles, etc., the theory which works as the quantum theory Whereas the macro, you have a totally different set of knowledge, totally different set of ideas, formulae. Now, the big question, which is still unresolved, is that whether nature has two sets of laws for two, microcosm and the macrocosm. The scientists and others believe that nature cannot have two different sets of laws. It is our ignorance which makes it impossible to know what nature actually wants to do. That is because there is a fundamental belief, philosophically, aesthetically, that nature is beautiful, Satyam, Sundaram, Shantam, Shivam. Sundarata, Saundarya, the beauty of nature is aesthetically, it's all one. You can't have two different sets of laws. And now, even now, the superstring theory is trying to find out whether these two can be merged into one. But alas, nature is still playing the trick. We have not been able to integrate these two. This is called the unified field theory, which Einstein was chasing as the holy grail till the end of his life. Let us see if we can get some clue into this from the Akasha idea. Akasha is a gross matter. What we see all around is only matter. Now we ask the question, where did this matter come from? The matter which you see as gross matter definitely must have evolved from something subtle, and that subtle matter must have evolved from something causal, and that once again should go back to something which is neither gross nor subtle nor causal. For example, if all the matter in the universe gets resolved into its origin, it will resolve into Akasha. Akasha is the subtlest of matter, which is omnipresent material, which is all penetrating existence. It is Akasha which Einstein perhaps was trying to find out in his unified field theory. And the Akasha, the all-pervading Akasha, was called ether before Einstein came, which is the medium through which light travels. This was the question. Air cannot travel without, sound cannot travel without air. If all air is pumped out, you can't hear any sound. But now, light travels through vacuum, as all of us know. Light, how does it travel through vacuum? They posited, the scientists before the 19th century, they posited an entity called ether, which is omnipresent, all-penetrating. And the Michelson-Morley experiment, which preceded Einstein, trying to find out the relative motion of the Earth through the ether. So ether is all-pervading, and the Earth is moving in ether. What is the relative motion, relative velocity of the Earth through the ether? Finally, they came up with the startling conclusion: the ether doesn't exist. As Eddington says, we came out with a wonderful, absolutely correct, and indisputable conclusion: the zero equal to zero. Zero equal to zero, is this equation correct? Of course it is. But what does it give you? Nothing. So the ether idea was rejected by science because of Einstein. They came in and then explained the whole thing in a totally different way. But the idea of the ether in a very different context, even now, that is being debated. Most of you must have heard of Professor E.C.G. Sudarshan, E.C. George Sudarshan, of Indian origin, who was in USA for a very long time. He was the founder director of the Center for Particle Theory in the University of Texas in Austin. He came out with the idea of the ether as a superfluid. It was worked out, but did not finally see the light of day. So the Akasha is something which perhaps comes very close to this and is omnipotent. Now the question arises, Akasha evolves all matter, and all matter ultimately gets involved and gets resolved into Akasha. The question asked by the rishis, by the ancient wise people, what is that power that the Akasha, by which Akasha is manufactured in this universe? Remember, some force is required. There are two objects, one is matter, other is force or energy. These are the two forces. And all matter at the end will get involved and resolved into Akasha. All force will get resolved into what we call prana. And both of them ultimately will get resolved into what Sankhya philosophy says, and Vedanta has accepted it as Mahat. Mahat is the word used by Sankhya, and the equivalent in Vedanta is Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic mind, into which the whole thing is manufactured. Remember, Vedanta does not distinguish between thought and matter. What is thought? Thought is a force. So a thought force, which is extremely subtle, ultimately evolves into matter. Swami Vivekananda says in the inspired talks, makes a very bold statement, matter is only externalized to thought. The opposite is also true. If matter is externalized to thought, thought is only internalized to matter. Is it a speculation? No. It is experiential. All of us experience this when you dream. When you dream, what else is there outside? Nothing. You have only your thoughts internalized, Antaprajna, as Mandukya Upanishad says. And the thought, interestingly, projects matter, objects. You see objects in dream. You see elephants and tigers and mangoes you eat and dream. The word mango, the thought mango, has materialized as this mango. I often think, how is it that the great yogis materialize objects? A yogi says, you want to eat a mango? Come, here is a mango. Swami Vivekananda says, I have seen such yogis, and one of them I asked, bring a very peculiar kind of fruit which he has not seen or heard of. He thought for a while, somebody brought it and gave it to me. I ate it and found it as real. So this is not magic. Swami Vivekananda says this is not magic. This is not supernatural. And he makes a bold statement, there is nothing called supernatural in the world. It is only natural, but our inability to know the secrets and the laws of that world makes us believe it is supernatural. So, the power of prana manufactures all these objects. Just like Akasha is infinite and omnipresent material of the universe, prana is also infinite, omnipresent, manifesting power of the universe. And therefore, this prana is often identified with Kali. In Bengal, as you know, on the eastern part of India, Shakti and Kali is worshipped. Not so much Shiva. Because Kali is the force which runs the universe. As long as you are living and walking and moving and eating and functioning, you are in the realm of Shakti. Beyond that, if you go, then you are in the realm of Shiva. So prana is considered also as Shiva, as Shakti. And prana is also called Hiranyagarbha. Many places. It's called Prajapati, it's called Hiranyagarbha. And you also know there is a cyclic theory in India, in Vedanta and Sankhya and other philosophies. Time is not linear but cyclic. It is not the universe began at one point, t equal to 0, and ended at one point, t equal to several billion years. No. It goes round and round, The whole thing is evolved from Akasha by prana striking it, and all the matter is created. And again, when they're involved, all matter goes back into Akasha, all the forces in the universe resolve back into prana. In the next cycle, after this prana is evolved everything. You may ask a very logical and scientific question. In the next cycle, who makes all this possible? Everything is resolved in Akasha, all the forces go back to prana. They are the same absolute equilibrium. Equilibrium is what we call the pralaya. And in Sankhya, as you know, the Prakriti or nature consists of three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And all the gunas are held in equilibrium. You have complete pralaya. And now a small vibration begins and the whole thing is once again comes. You may ask, who causes this vibration? The answer given is, there's one being, supreme being sitting there who is not controlled by Prakriti. He sits there and everything is involved into him, and by his will he projects it. He is given the name God, he is given the supreme being, Ishvara, and so on. You may ask the question, how do you know that there's a God which is possible? The answer is very simple. Look at yourself first. Don't worry about God and nature, the supreme being, the sun and the moon and the atoms and molecules. Just look at yourself. This is another great idea which the Upanishads speak about. The whole thing is evolved from the microcosm and projected onto the macrocosm and back again. We do not know the secret of the universe. Nobody does. Science has been struggling for decades after decades. Vedanta and Sankhya have been struggling for millennia. So many models of the universe creation have been put out. They are only models and theories. Remember, nothing can be claimed as absolute. Somebody comes out with a model, and as long as it works with the experiment, it goes. And some other theory comes out when the experiment fails. So that is said, the corridor of science is littered with the skeletons of discarded theories. You go on moving. What is the skeleton? Oh, this is Newton's theory. You move on, so this is Einstein's theory. This is how science evolves. Scientific temperament means you are very bold in your thinking. Swami Vivekananda said, Vedantic rishis were very bold in their thinking. They made very bold generalizations. We'll come to that in a moment. How do you know about the macrocosm? I do not know anything. Then they ask, can you concentrate in the microcosm? What is the microcosm? Microcosm is my body, my mind, my thought, all that is in me and with me. That we find out, investigate. That's not very difficult. If you delve into yourself, that is why yoga is so important. Yoga says, go into yourself first. Don't worry about what's happening elsewhere. This is the difference between the objective science, the physical sciences, and the science of yoga, which says, go back into your own source, the microcosm, having found the clue there, and project it on to the macrocosm. So you can't find out, okay, other than the macrocosm. This is the meaning of the famous mythological story of Ganesha and Kartika. You know the story? The mother of these two children, Parvati Uma, had a beautiful fruit or a necklace. She said, my children, whose of you can circumambulate the entire universe and come back fastest, I will give you this. And Ganesha was simply quietly sitting. Kartika said, oh, my brother is so bulky, he can't move. Look at me, this moment I go. He took the jet in that Boeing, that Mayur Vahana, the peacock, started moving. By the time he came back, he saw Ganesha already having that prize. Then he got furious. What did Ganesha do? He went round thrice his own mother Because the entire universe is contained in you, mother. So I have circumambulated the universe. So this is the story of objective science, Kartika, going around and seeing, explore the moon, explore the Mars, go on exploring everything, explore into the mechanism of the atom. What we had in CERN experiment recently, Large Hadron Collider experiment, how many billions of euros were spent, more than 10,000 scientists were involved, find out the origin of the universe. Then they discovered and proved what is known as the Higgs particle, which wrongly has been called the God particle. You know how the whole thing evolved? Very funny story is there. So a paper was written on this and sent to a scientific magazine, and this particle was not discovered. And the editor of the magazine, or one of the reviewers, said, this particle is impossible to find, goddamn particle. Then the second editor said, damn is not a good word. Remove that word, it became God particle. There's nothing to do with God. So the idea is, always go into yourself and project onto the macrocosm. This is also an important way of life. The Indian way is always going into yourself and project it on the macrocosm. In the same way, God also thinks in his own mind and projects the matter from his own mind. Just like in dream, we have a thought, and that thought becomes an object, and the object is being perceived by me. Who is me? I see the thought after having projected the object out of thought. So the sphere is also me, the scene is also me. Which shows the consciousness as a unique capacity of dividing itself into a subject and an object. Which is you, which is me. Find out how great, how wonderful we are. And you'll be amazed to go deeper and deeper, find out the dimensions of your own self, your own consciousness. So what you call force is prana, and the prana evolves as a force. And Swami Vivekananda makes a very bold statement. It is not only the spiritual or the mental force. Prana is gravitation. Prana is magnetic force. Prana, the nerve currents of the body, it is a thought force. So next one. It is a thought force. The nerve currents and the thought force of the body, that's also prana. So the mental and physical, all the forces in the universe are resolved back to the original state, is called a prana. So knowledge and control of this prana is really what is called pranayama. So look at this bold statement. Pranayama is not simply blowing through the nose, but it is getting control of the whole of prana. Here Swamiji makes another interesting statement. So at the end of the cycle, the energy is thus displayed, quietened down, become potential. All of you know the potential energy and the kinetic energy, all of them become potential. That means the energy and the force are still there, but they are not manifested. When the next cycle begins, cycle means kalpa. You have the idea of kalpa and the yuga. This startup, strike up an akasha. Out of akasha evolves these various forms. As the akasha changes, prana changes into the manifestations of energy. The knowledge and control of this prana is really what is meant by pranayama. In individual body, you look at it. So before you know how the various forces merge into prana in the cosmic world, and all matter resolves in the akasha in the macrocosm, let us look at the microcosm. The microcosm, how do you take hold of prana? We take hold of prana by taking hold of breaths. And now, one more idea which Vivekananda speaks about. Fundamental question the Upanishad asks, what is that by knowing which everything can be known? The idea is, you can't be knowing everything in the universe. Can you know about this whole universe? the sun and the moon and the stars and galaxies and billions of stars. By the time light reaches here, the star is already dead. Such a vast universe outside. And inside your own mind, so much of vastness is there. So the prano virat, the forces are so huge. Even the dream, you do not know what it is. Your own body. Neuro-physiological scientists, neurophysiologists and scientists are simply amazed at the kind of power that the brain has. The nervous system is something which is simply beats you. And you have the nervous system, you have the alimentary canal, and you have the reproductive system, and you have the heart which is pumping. Look at your human body. Can anybody analyze the functions of the body? It's not so easy. And the mind, and beyond that, the spirit. So the generalized principle of Akasha and all the forces into prana. Here's a speculation which I'm trying to make. Einstein's attempt to discover a unified field theory and the modern attempt in physics, which is called the theory of everything. Those of you who have gone through Stephen Hawking's book, The Brief History of Time, will know he speaks about theory of everything. Now, we talk about the Internet of Things. Artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. Now they combine both of them and said artificial intelligence of things. That means all the things that you see are not unintelligent. They have their own peculiar kind of intelligence. And the claim by the artificial intelligence people, which is called strong AI people, they say, wait for some time. A time will come that the robotics, all these robots will be able to function like a human brain. In a sense, it may be true, because the brain is also dull matter. And what you see in the robot is also matter. So if the brain can be controlled by the body and intelligence, why not the intelligence control the robots? Who controls the robots? The intelligence of man. Who controls the brain? That's also the consciousness of man. So the consciousness can be brought to bear upon the mind. It is mental intelligence. The consciousness is brought to bear upon the spirit. It evolves as the spirit. This is Swami Vivekananda's statement. Consciousness is brought to bear upon matter. It evolves material development. Consciousness brought to bear upon mind. It evolves mental development. And it brought to bear upon itself. Then to become a spiritually evolved person. So Vedanta says the cosmic dimension of the Atman is Brahman. And the microcosm and macrocosm are one and the same. Atman is identical to Brahman. This is a very interesting and simple idea. The macrocosm and the microcosm are built in the same plan. Now, I go deep into myself. I just look at myself. I look at the body, which is the grossest. I realize the body through the senses. I can touch my body. I can feel my body. I can smell my body. I can taste my body, if you like. I can see my body. I can hear my body also. The senses become extremely sensitive. Great yogis and men of great thought have said, even J. Krishnamurti in the modern times used to say, the body has its own intelligence. You can hear the body speak. And the new movement in the West, the body speaketh. The body tells you, no, I don't feel well, don't eat much today. But we violate the body's dictates. We can't listen to the body. When you become highly sensitive, what you call sattvic, you can hear the body speak to you. The body tells you what to do and what not to do. You see the body, then go deeper, see the layer of prana. What is that prana? Prana is that which moves your body, which makes you talk, which makes you think. all the vital energy that you have is the prana. So it's called the pranamaya. This Atman, which is you, which is me, the self, is a 5-layered entity. The first layer, the Annamaya, which is the body, physical gross body. The next layer, the Pranamaya, which is the vital. It goes still further up. They call it the Manomaya, which is the mind. Now, penetrating deeper than the mind, the Upanishad, the Rishis discovered, particularly through the Gayatri Mantra, what is called the Vijnanamaya, discussed in Gayatri as the Dhi, Thiyo Yona Prachodaya. Dhi is called Buddhi, the Buddhi Guha, Hridaya Akasha. It's also called in Yoga Sutra, Ritambhara Pragya, Pragya Aloka. It's light. And that is realized as a Vijnanamaya. It can be called as a spiritually awakened intuitive intelligence. Not that you analytically know things. How do you know? You analyze. You go on analyzing in science and get knowledge. There's another kind of knowledge received through not analysis but synthesis. Intuitively. Once again, Arthur Eddington gives a very beautiful example. There are certain things which you understand through analysis. It's called symbolic knowledge. That's what science does. And we glorify this, but really science grows from intuitive understanding. This is true. Einstein had that intuitive understanding. Many of the great scientists, Ramakrishna was a great scientist, great mathematician who had worked only through intuition. And he put it in a very funny language that my goddess, Devata, comes and tells me in my dreams all these various theorems. Hardy asked him, Ramanujan, how do you get this theorem? Where do they come from? He said, he was a shy boy. He said, you see, sir, in my dream, my Kuladevata, the goddess of Namagiri, she comes and tells me, and I write down. And Hardy smiles and says, this boy is doubtless a great mathematical genius, but hopelessly religious. It is the hopelessly religious people who are the salt of this earth. Most of the discoveries in science have been found through that. All of you must have heard of Kekule. This is being mentioned by Roger Penrose in his famous first book, Emperor's New Mind. Kekule was a chemist. At that time, he was wondering, what is the structure of the benzene? He was completely conditioned with the aliphatic compounds, which are linear in structure, the methane, ethane, and so on, the organic compounds. And he could not crack this idea. What is the structure of benzene? Constantly thinking, he became tired and dozed off. It was not a sleep, but he was catapulted to a higher state of consciousness, as it were, when he saw, actually most of these come through vision, seeing. That's why in India, philosophy is called darshana, seeing. He saw a huge dragon made of carbon atoms, and this dragon opened his mouth, it was biting its tail. And with a jerk, he got up and said, that's it. It is a cyclic structure of benzene. It was discovered not through analytical mind, but a mind which is beyond analysis, which comes through intuitive understanding. This higher mind is called Vijnanamaya. Then beyond that, you go to the realm of the infinite, which is called Anandamaya. And Advaita Vedanta, due to Shankaracharya, will tell you, even beyond that, there's a realm which is Nirguna, absolute, infinite, formless, ocean of consciousness. Why I mention this is because from the microcosmic, you pass on to the macrocosmic through projection. After having discovered your own self as the Atman, you ask, what is the universal consciousness which is pervading the whole world, cosmos? A universal cosmic consciousness, they call it Brahman. So you have interconvertibility of the microcosmic and macrocosmic dimensions. The Akasha and Prana principles as interconvertible microcosmic dimensions of gross, subtle generalization. The yogi gains control of the whole universe, the individual level as well as the collective level. This is where he gets control. Swamiji asserts the range of prana is very vast, prano virat, from the physical, through the mental, to the spiritual. He says, wherever there's an extraordinary display of power, the manifestation of prana, even physical sciences can be included in pranayama. That part of pranayama which attempts to control the physical manifestation of prana by physical means is called physical science. And that part which tries to control the manifestation of prana mental force by mental means is called Raja Yoga, which means how Swami Vivekananda integrates what we call the physical sciences, mental sciences, and the spiritual sciences. There is one continuum of thought. The idea of continuum, as you know, was introduced by Albert Einstein once again. Space and time was separated out. Einstein came and said in the special theory of relativity, space and time are a continuum. It's called the space-time continuum. You cannot think of a point in space and a moment in time. You can only say an event in space-time. This event takes place at this point of time and at this moment, at this point in space. So you call it an event in space-time and not a point in space or a moment in time. Now, in the general theory of relativity, which came 10 years later, 1905 was the special theory, 1915 was Einstein's general theory. In the general theory, he found that matter also can be included in this continuum. He gave an extraordinarily difficult and subtle explanation of gravitation. It is not that one object is pulling the other object through gravitational force. It is that the pull which is seen between two objects, which you call gravitational force, is actually because the curvature of the space-time continuum. Bertrand Russell has a small book, ABC of Relativity. All of you should read this book. So much of clarity in simple language. He gives an example. It's pitch dark, and there's a beacon of light at the top of a hill. And so many people with small lanterns in their hands are trying to reach the top through curved paths. Somebody looking from above will see that there's a small, big light beacon, and small lights are circling around this because the big light is trying to pull them through gravitational force or some force. And when the daylight dawns, they see there's nothing because the paths are curved, they're seen to move in curved paths. And very humorously, he says, in this analogy, the beacon light is the sun, people with the lanterns are the planets, and the dawning of the day is the coming of Einstein. So he said, it is only nature has made this path curved. The curvature of space-time, which was actually proved by Eddington, 1930, in that famous experiment which he performed during total solar eclipse. It was reported to Einstein, bending of a ray of light and the curvature of space-time. And it is reported to Einstein by his student LC, said, "Sir, your theory has been vindicated, shown to be right." Einstein was sipping a lazy tea, and he smiled and said, "I knew all the time it was right." Then Elsie asked him, with irritation, what would you have done if it had proved wrong? Again, with a smile, Einstein said, I would have been unhappy and sorry for God, but I know my theory is right. That is the power of theory. That is exactly what our rishis did. Rishis, through intuitive understanding, going deep, found out certain fundamental theories which are indisputable. You find out it through experiments. People with strong theoretical background, therefore, are very invincible, and it's not easy. Pure theory, nowadays, slowly people are giving it up because of applications. So, this Raja Yoga, it is actually the control of the manifestations of prana. Now, Swamiji also talks about the psychic prana. Last few minutes, I'll talk about this. Swamiji says the prana working in the body. Now we're coming back to ourselves, the microcosm. You are sitting there listening to me. I am talking here. Our bodies are straight, attentive, I suppose. And prana, the life force, is working through the muscles and nerves. You must have taken your lunch just now. And you do not worry how it is going to be digested by the digestive system. And your heart is pumping as usual. You do not worry about whether it is pumping or not. Your brain is functioning through the whole network of nerves. And your breath is moving. Lungs are also being pumping the air. Now, through the science of Hatha Yoga, they found the prana is working through 3 nerve currents. They are called the Chandra and Surya. It's also a very peculiar idea because the entire world is being controlled by Chandra Surya. Moon, Chandra controls the Tithi, what we call Tithi, the movements. Prathama, Vidya, etc. Ekadashi is very special, Amavasya is special. And the other is Surya, which controls the seasons, yearly seasons. The monthly aspect is controlled by Chandra, Moon, and the annual thing is taken care of by the Surya. Our whole life is regulated by Chandra and Surya. And we have found out, modern psychologists also say, the whole of humanity can be divided into 2 groups of people. One is the Chandra type, other is the Surya type. They call them lark and owl types. Owl, as you know, is a bird which cannot see in daytime but awake at night. And lark gets up very early in the morning and starts singing. During daytime, it falls asleep. Similarly, all humanity can be divided into 2. There are some people who are extremely active at night. They wake up through the night and go on studying. In the morning, they feel lazy. Other type of people get up very early in the morning. So don't force your children or anybody to do this or that. Now, psychologists have discovered what is called flexi time. There's a particular time at which you are at the peak of your performance. You choose that and work. So the Chandra Surya controlling the entire macrocosm outside. In your own body, the Chandra Surya are working with Ida and Pingala. That is the theory. See how macrocosm and microcosm are giving you inputs into this discovery. So the breath which is moving in your body, God has provided with 2 nostrils. Most of the creatures also have 2 nostrils. Why 2, we do not know. But they discover the 2 nostrils correspond to Chandra and Surya. The right nostril to Surya and the left one to Chandra. So your breath is constantly moving, this is true. And there is samanvaya between Chandra and Surya Nadi, Ida and Pingala. Then your mind becomes extremely calm. Now, Swami Vivekananda raises a very interesting question. All this is happening, as you know, because of nerve currents, right? The nervous system is responsible. And there is a spinal column in between the Pingala, the Ida and Pingala, the right and left. They go like a serpent, you know, the shape like that. like a form of 8, which is vertically put. Now, the psychic currents, the mental currents, the nervous currents pass through the left and the right, Ida and Pingala, and there is spinal column, the canal between, which is the Sushumna. All of you know from physiology, even school physiology, is called instant action, spontaneous action. When you touch a current, you get a shock. Before the shock is conveyed to nerve currents to the brain and the brain gives signal, there's no time. So the whole brain is bypassed and the spinal cord itself gives a quick signal. We know this from physiology. So the Sushumna, which is the central canal, also plays a very important part. Now, Ida and Pingala operate through nerve currents, just like wires. Just like if you have a telephone, in those days we had the landline phone, you have a telephone, if the wire is cut, if there's no connection to the wire, you can't hear properly. Now, Swami Vivekananda asks, long before wireless was discovered, Swami Vivekananda says, through Ida and Pingala, you're able to communicate through nerve currents like wires. Nature does not require wires to communicate. Nature does not require any nerve currents. There's a lightning. Terrible electricity is generated because of the crash of this clouds. And this electricity is communicated to the earth in some circumstances. And this electricity is being discharged on somebody, some building, and the entire thing is a devastation. Several million volts of electricity. Swamiji asks this question, how is nature doing this? Nature doesn't require wires. How much of networking a wire will be required by nature if nature has to discharge that much of electricity and lightning? Nature doesn't require wires. And he says that shows that wires are not actually required. But our inability at the moment to dispense with wires makes it necessary for us to use them. This was spoken long before wireless was discovered. Now you know how wireless is discovered, much more. You have the internet, you have mobile phones everywhere, the smartphones. Phones are not smart, but man is smart because he has invented those phones. So the Sushumna canal is the wireless canal. The prana flows through the Sushumna canal, the psychic prana, the mental prana. It is extremely fast because when you have wires, it is very slow. So it quickly, but Sushumna, unfortunately, is closed in most people like us. Whole aim of pranayama is how to awaken, how to open the Sushumna canal. He says, this prana flowing through Ida and Pingala, when there is equanimity, and both of them are controlled in Kumbhaka, this prana comes and hits the bottom of the Mooladhara, as they call it, in the Tantras, and the Sushumna opens. And Swami Vivekananda says, whenever there is any creativity in the world, is the opening of Sushumna. In fact, he says, even dreams, when you dream, because there's a creativity, you are creating objects out of thoughts. This creativity of the mind, consciousness in dream is also the action of the prana slipping into Sushumna and going up. The scriptural evidence is given there. The scriptural evidence is given there, the Kathopanishad, even the Upanishad is mentioned. Katam chaikaja hridayasya nadya tasam murdhanam abhinisridayika ayordhamayan amritatvameti vishwanganya utgramane bhavanti. 101 nerves of the heart. One of them, one has gone up piercing through the head, going up through it, one attains immortality. Others at the time of death lead to different ways. Shankaracharya in his commentary Bhashya mentions that this is the Sushumna Nadi. It is a very interesting discovery by the yogis. All attempt of pranayama is how to awaken the Kundalini from the Mooladhara and make it pass through the Sushumna. Kundalini is nothing but a storehouse of prana. The pranic energy should be taken up and moved. And the Tantra speaks about several chakras. This also Swami Vivekananda has mixed it up with the yoga practice and given us an integral system of what is known as the Raja Yoga. And he says, this rousing of the Kundalini Shakti is one and the only way to attain divine wisdom, superconscious perception, realization of the spirit. This can be done through bhakti, love of God. When you intensely have love of God, then you become so absorbed in God's greatness and wisdom and glory and His power that spontaneously the Kundalini gets roused. So the mercy of perfected sages, satsanga, the power of analytical will of a philosopher, jnana. In the ordinary man, the Sushumna is closed. The yogi alone has Sushumna is open. When the Sushumna current opens, begins to rise, we get beyond the sense. The minds become super conscious, super sensuous. We get beyond even the intellect, where the reasoning cannot reach. To open the Sushumna is the prime object of the yogi. So the energy is taken up from the Mooladhara. There are 6 chakras mentioned. Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddha, Ajna, and finally in the head it is Sahasrara. Now the danger, Swamiji also warns, unless you practice brahmacharya, chastity, extremely pure life, it's very dangerous to try to awaken the Kundalini. Now so many yogas have come up, so many varieties of yoga, the Kundalini yoga. But in the West, people think the Kundalini is so easy to awaken. A Westerner came and said, Swami, I felt a peculiar sensation at my back. He said, the Kundalini? It's not so easy. Swami Ranganathanandaji, our great president, used to say, allow the Kundalini to sleep, don't awaken it without children. So now I'll introduce the last concept in the course. There is a power called Ojas. Swami Vivekananda says, the whole idea to transform all our energies, prana, into this Ojas. And the Ojas is stored up in the brain, and the forces working in the body is the highest is Ojas. It's a question of transformation. The yogis say that part of the human energy which is expressed as sex energy in sexual thought, when checked and controlled, easily becomes changed into Ojas. That is why chastity is considered the highest virtue. And they also said, you can't aspire to be a yogi and play with all these words, and at the same time live an unchaste life. This is just not admissible. So the ultimate aim, look at this, we say Retas, sex energy in the Mooladhara Swadhisthana, gets transformed into Tejas, the mental, intellectual energy in the Manipura. That's why you say a boy or a girl is very bright in studies, intellectual, mental energy, he has a Tejas in his face. That is a simply mental energy, intellectual energy, remember. That gets transformed into higher intuitive wisdom energy called in the Anahata, was called Varchas, and the Bhargas in the Vishuddha. That is the Bharga, which is mentioned in the Gayatri Mantra. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yona Prachodayas. The Varchas is called the Brahma Varchas. Brahman means the Vedas. The higher intuitive wisdom energy called in the Anahata, Varchas, it leaves you so many experiences. You see a divine light. You hear Anahata Dhvani, unstruck sound, and the whole life gets transformed into spiritually awakened person. Bhargas Vishuddha, and the Ajna Chakra is called Archish. So such a person is called Archishman. a very famous name for boys, Archishman. Ultimately, when it reaches Ojas in the Sahasrara, for prayer, may we as sincere aspirants in the path of yoga be blessed with such an inner transformation is our earnest prayer. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Order. Thank you so much for so patiently listening. So if anybody has any question, you may ask or put it in the chat box. Yes, sir.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, can you elaborate the Ritambara Progga in the view of Swami Vivekananda?
Ritambara Prajna is word used in the Yoga Sutras. Ritam is a very interesting word in the Vedas, taken by yogis also in the Yoga Sutra. Ritam is Satyam. Ritam and Satyam are two words which are used to mention truth. Ritam vadishyami, Satyam vadishyami, etc. So Ritam Bhara means filled. So that truth, Satya, which is filled, that which is filled with truth. Ritambhara prajna, the prajna, the higher intelligence, which corresponds to the awakening of the chakra, which corresponds to the anahata chakra. The anahata corresponds to the Vijnanamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya Atma. And Vijnanamaya Atma in the Vedanta and the anahata, which is in the yoga, tantra. So when it awakens, you enter in a total new world of light. You enter, you first realize yourself as a spirit living in the body. That is Ritambhara Prajna, which is also called Prajna Aloka. Aloka is light. The whole life will be guided by divine light, in which all confusion ceases. Our whole life is because of confusion by the mind, analytical mind, which analyzes truths, and you come up with a conclusion, to be or not to be, that is the question. The mind is called Sankalpa Vikalpatmak Manas. There's a Sankalpa and there's a Vikalpa, to do or not to do, to be or not to be. Now when we go higher, then the awakening of the Buddhi or the Ritambhara Prajna, or what is called Dhi, that gives you clarity. Even in spiritual path, not only in spiritual path, even in ordinary life, when that is awakened, no more confusion comes to you. You clearly know what is right and wrong, what is good for you, what is not good for you. The whole thing, as if big searchlight is put on your whole life. That is the Ritambhara Prajna, the Prajna Aloka, mentioned in the Yoga Sutra, that corresponds to Anahata in the Tantra, Anahata Chakra, corresponds to Vijnanamaya in the Vedanta. All these are matters of experience. What I am telling you is not from experience, from what little I learned from the great Swamis of the order and what little I have studied. Mainly based on Swami Vivekananda. Yoga is a very serious business. You may use it even for worldly things, but purity. That's most of the solution. It is not that you should not marry and get children, it's allowed. But you should maintain tremendous purity as much as possible, save that Rathas and convert it ultimately into Ojas through a series of steps. Rathas to Tejas to Bhargas to Archis and Ojas. These are all experience of the rishis and the yogis. Inexhaustible energy will come to you. So anybody else? So think about what you have heard. Shravana, Manana Nididhyasana. The Upanishad says, Vridaranyaka. First you keenly listen, then you deeply contemplate on what you have listened, and finally you get absorbed in the thought and merge in it and become a yogi. May we all become yogis, and Tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Bhagavan says in the Gita, Tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Let us be yogis. Om Shanti.
Yes.